Hey, how you doing? It's Clayton here from howtodrawcomics.net and welcome to today's comic art demonstration. In this video, we are going to be drawing up a brand new concept for a character called Boroq the Brute. And in fact, you may have seen the first iteration of this character's concept, created right here in front of you on the How to Draw Comics channel a few years ago now. Well, this is version 2.0, where we are going to be expanding upon the visual representation of who this character is, what they are, adding additional visual interest to their appearance and invoking a more intense mood. Because at the end of the day, the main purpose of a character's design and the reason as to why you would put an extreme amount of effort, thought, and energy into how they're going to look, maybe by designing the character yourself or hiring out a third-party character concept designer, is because this is what causes the audience to react. A good character design is going to grab their attention. It's the characters on the front of your comic book cover that is going to pull people in, make them curious, and hopefully open up that cover to read the sequential storytelling inside that once again will feature that character's beautiful design. Now, if your character doesn't have a design that gets people engaged, that grabs their attention, then it's very likely you won't be able to cultivate a very large audience for your comic book at all. So again, this is well worth any investment of time or money that you may have to spend in order to nail down a killer-looking character design for the cast within your comic book. Yes, it's not just the main character that you want to have a good design for. You want every single player within that comic book to look great. In fact, that's probably not the right way to put it. Not every character has to look great. You're going to have some ugly, horrifying looking villains, no doubt, as an example within your story. But what a good character design does is it helps to drop clues, visual cues, if you will, to the audience about that character's backstory, where they came from, why they do the things they do, their motivations, how they think about themselves, how they think about others. All of these things are expressed through the way in which a character looks. If you think about yourself on a day-to-day basis, how do you dress? How do you dress, especially when you go out? Maybe you don the leather jacket, put some gel in your hair, make yourself look real slick. If you're a lady, maybe put on some lipstick, some eyeshadow, do your hair real nice. Why do we do these things? Well, it's because we want to say something about ourselves through our visual appearance. Now, we may not look like that all the time, because how we think of ourselves when we're out in public isn't always 100% congruent with how we think about ourselves when we're just at home bumming around. But the point is that there is a certain level of motivation that we have to make ourselves appear in a certain way, to suggest a particular story that we want others to perceive about us when they're observing us, when they're taking us in. And so it only makes sense that we should do the same thing for our characters, that we should dress them up, draw them in such a way, clothe them, design them in a way that suggests a particular story, a particular narrative we want to have surround them. And really, when all you've got primarily is visuals to suggest such things, because we're talking about comic book illustration here, not movies. Yes, there is a certain amount of exposition that can be revealed through the character's dialogue, but really you don't want to have to depend on that. when it comes to comic books. You want to take advantage of that visual medium by hiring a killer artist or becoming a killer artist yourself so that you can tell the story predominantly through visuals. A good character design is going to enable you to be able to do that more effectively. The same thing can be said about your character's environment and the sets that you decide to put them in. An environment can say so much about who a character is. For example, why are they there in the first place? Are they there to visit somebody else, or do they live there? Is that their natural habitat? These are things worth thinking about and considering, and most importantly, they are the most fun aspects of storytelling. So embrace it. Really try to become a part of your character's world. Think about what it would be like to walk around in their skin. How would you feel? What would you do? What would you wear? Who would you hang out with? Really try to, we call this in movie acting role-playing. We want to role-play our character to an extent. Get inside their mind a little bit. And then, of course, comes the visual aspect, the more technical side of character design. What I mean by that is ensuring that the visual representation that you've come up with for your character reads correctly, that it's visually decipherable, that it's not confusing to look at, especially for the reader. You want the audience to easily be able to tell, especially if there's multiple characters in a particular panel or many panels, exactly who it is they're looking at out of the cast of characters that are featured within your comic book story. So we have Boroq the Brute here, but I want to make sure that he looks visually unique and memorable when sitting next to, some other barbarian that may have similar visual elements throughout their design that suggest they are indeed a barbarian, but that set them apart from Boroq, that make them different somehow, especially when viewing them from a distance, because it's not always going to be the case that these characters are going to be drawn in a close-up manner where you can see all the details, and this is why silhouette plays an extremely important role when it comes to creating a memorable character that's easily recognizable. If you think about some of the most popular characters in our culture, such as Homer Simpson or Mickey Mouse, Popeye, Stewie from Family Guy, what do all these characters have in common? Well, when you take all the details out and you're just looking at a black silhouette of them, you can still tell, without a doubt, exactly who that character is. And so what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that the details aren't anywhere near as important as the macro visuals that we need to consider when it comes to creating a character design that really sticks with the audience. And what I mean by the macro visuals, I'm talking about the larger elements that contribute greatly to the overall shape of your character. So, if we take a look at Boroq here, you can see that on his armor, around the forearm there, he's got these large spikes, demon tusks, poking out. And if we were to turn his arm to black, we could see how dramatically they adjust the silhouette, the effect that it has on his outline. It's things like this that you want to try to think about when it comes to your own character designs. Try to incorporate where you can. Think about where you can modify the outer contour of your character to increase the memorability of your character, to make it so that whenever a newcomer who has never heard of your story passes by your character, instantly their attention is grabbed at the corner of their eye. think about when you see something indirectly in your peripheral vision. What is the first thing that you take in? What grabs your attention? What causes you to turn your head? It is a vague, blurry, overall outline of whatever it is you're about to pay attention to. Well, we're kind of trying to create the same effect here. We need to ask ourselves, before our audience takes in all the detail and really studies our character on a closer level, what are they going to perceive first and foremost? And so, if we think about our character being taken in phases, that macro phase I spoke about before, where the broader overall design elements within our character are processed first, and then it's those littler components, those minor details, the decorative icing on the cake, if you will, that if the character overall is interesting enough for the viewer to invest their time into, their valuable time, because there is so many things in the modern age biting for our attention, that we can only spend a limited amount of time even on the things that do pique our interest, because there's just so many things, so much real estate that's being taken up by the internet, by video games, by our mobile phones, our email inboxes, you name it. And so if we're to make a significant impact on the audience, if we're to grab their attention and really hold it there, then we've got to make sure that we're serving up for them something that is absolutely going to blow them away. There are no half measures, especially now, and that's a good thing. It holds us as creators accountable. It means that we have no choice but to make sure that we're putting out the very, very best that we possibly can, to put our best foot forward. And so this is why I always take the time to put together a solid character design, and sometimes that does mean rehashing characters that I absolutely love and adore, but maybe need to be spiced up a little bit. This is exactly what I'm doing here for Boroq. Now let me tell you a little bit about why now, in particular, I've decided to revisit this beautiful brute. Well, the reason is, my brother Corey and I, we've, for a while in fact, had our comic book Kozor, Descent into Madness, up on Indiegogo, which you can check out via the link in the description below. And it's been, by all accounts, an incredible success for us. I mean, there's different levels of success when it comes to crowdfunding comic books, of course. There are some comic books that make millions of dollars, others that make significantly less, and I like to think that, we're somewhere in between. Regardless of the comparisons that you can make with other creators, we're stoked. We're absolutely blown away. We didn't think that we would see this level of success on our first comic book campaign. But you know what? Thanks to all the amazing backers who have jumped on board and supported our comic book creating endeavors with Kozor, we've been afforded the time to expand upon that universe and think about what other characters we might be able to build off of this amazing story. And well, it just so happens that Corey, who is the original creator and illustrator of Kozor, decided that Boroq would be a cool character to have cameo in issue 2. And so I said to him one day, look, what if we took it a step further, Corey? What if we went ahead and actually created a Boroq spin-off of Kozor? What kind of places could we take this character? How might we explore his story? And how could we, again, once more, expand and increase the depth the world, the universe of Kozor. Well, both Corey and I were very excited about that prospect, and after I came across an incredible artist who I thought could definitely pull off what I wanted to achieve with Boroq the Brute, I decided that we were going to be all systems go on it, and that just to start off with, we'd create a short for Boroq. And this short would in fact surround the first illustration that I ever did of the character, which, again, you've probably already seen if you're a long-time viewer of the channel, where he's slaughtering, decapitating 3 goblins who have been looting the king's supplies, stealing his slaves, and gutting his guards. Who you gonna call when you got a goblin problem? Well, as reluctant as the king is to hire the great and notorious demon hunter Boroq, he decides to bite the bullet. Why is he so reluctant? Well, Boroq, he asks a hefty price, and he's also kind of an asshole. He's not fun to deal with, but you gotta do what you've gotta do, and Boroq is the man to get the job done. Some say, in fact, that he was born in the very same place as these goblins, in the underworld. He is a primordial beast in his own right, you might say. An absolute savage, standing 8 foot tall or more. A giant of a man. So we're very excited to get this book going, but of course, because I'm hiring another artist to work on it, because I've got my hands full with enough projects already, I can't draw everything. But I've got a lot of ideas, and so I've got to learn how to delegate. Being a massive control freak, that's difficult, and I'm still learning how to do it effectively without bottlenecking myself, but I feel like I'm making progress, especially getting Boroq underway. We've got Renegade Alpha coming out. We're still wrapping up on Kozor, the remastered edition of issue 1. So we got a lot in the works, and we'd like to take it to a whole other level in 2021. We're super excited. The other really cool thing about this particular concept is that it marks another big milestone in my own progression as a comic book artist. Many of you know, who've been following my work for an extended period of time, that it takes me quite many weeks, sometimes months, to complete a single illustration. And that's no joke. I'm a slow artist. It is well known. And so what that meant is it was very difficult for me to take on commissions from other people because, there was just no point. The amount of money, no matter how much was being paid to me, would never justify the amount of time that I was spending on these illustrations for other people. So commissions were really out of the question. I couldn't take on very many, if any at all, which was sad. It was upsetting because there are so many amazing projects that I would like to lend my abilities and skill set to. On top of that, whenever I did set out to create an illustration, even for myself, there would be a certain amount of foreboding that would be felt within me. And that was really unfortunate because I want, whenever I sit down to draw anything, I want it to be fun. I want it to be a good experience that I'm looking forward to, not a foreboding one. I want to know that when I get back up from that drawing board that I've made progress, that there's something cool that I can look at on the page, be proud of. And the amount of time that it was taking me to do anything just meant that this was a very drawn out process. I knew that a massive investment of time would be required just going into it, and the arduousness that I would perceive from that expectation was just discouraging. It made me not look forward to drawing anymore. And that's never a place that I wanted to find myself in. And so I had to do something. What was the biggest obstacle in front of me? Speed. Getting things done. I had to conquer my perfectionism. I had to overcome it. Not overanalyze things so much. And just create. And have fun creating. When did drawing become such a challenge? When did creating comic books manifest such potent levels of anxiety and cause me to fall into what could be described as depression whenever I thought about my artwork? You know, I know it sounds crazy, but damn. It was certainly a hurdle that I needed to get past. And if I wasn't able to, it would mean that I would only be able to do a very small amount of work within the next few years. You know, I think about how much time I have, and I know this sounds mad, but I often think about how much time I've got left at the drawing board. I know I'm only 30, but you get tireder, your focus wanes, your wrist starts to ache a little bit quicker. Each time you sit down to draw for a long time, and the thought does creep into your head when the arthritis kicks in, when the RSI starts to come knocking at the door. And it wouldn't be the first time I've felt the impact of that. How much time do I have left to draw? And how many more artworks am I going to be able to share with the world? It was a depressing question that I would often visit in my mind. And I knew that if I could only get faster, I'd be able to fix all of that. I'd be able to push out more artwork than ever. I might actually be able to do a comic book, a full comic book, in a reasonable amount of time. And so I bit the bullet. I started drawing live on streams, just for fun. That's right, just for fun. Who would have known? I didn't have any expectation about the outcome. I didn't need it to turn out perfect. And I think that caused me to relax a little bit, caused me to loosen up somewhat. And it, most importantly, forced me to really just indulge in the process and have fun. Have fun. And you can only have fun by indulging in the process, the act of creating, drawing, inking, coloring, whatever it is you're doing within the comic art pipeline. And I found that I was able to work much quicker, and because of that quickness, my art had this additional level of energy within it, spontaneity. And that just made it a whole lot more pleasurable to produce. First time I did this, it was with a Kozor piece of Chief Baron, the main character within Kozor, Descent into Madness. Another beastly man. Heck, what can I say? I enjoy drawing them. I think they're kick-ass characters. They have got flaws. They do not beat around the bush. They are essentially anti-heroes, I would say. Not necessarily likable, but someone you might want to have around if you got a pack of demons chasing after you. And I thought, man, this is amazing. This piece that I've just done up of Chief Baron is not only an artwork that I produced in an unprecedented amount of time for me, but it also looks better than ever. It has life and soul to it. I looked at what I was observing on the page, and I started to worry about whether or not I could create it again. And isn't that funny? That I actually started to worry about something that didn't stress me out at the time. I started worrying about replicating it in some way. Well, that's exactly what I did. I jumped on another stream, and I decided to whip out another artwork. I forget what it is. I think it was a very quick piece for another comic book title that a friend of ours, Rob Arnold, has in the works. There's recently crowdfunded himself, called Replicator. I managed to pull it off again. I said, hey, this is going somewhere. This is exciting. And then I decided that maybe I didn't need the streams. Maybe I could just sit down, work with haste, and knock something out. And that's exactly when I took the opportunity to redesign Boroq here for the comic book short that we are going to be producing for him. And if that comic book short does go well, I will turn it into a full comic book. It might not be as long as 48 pages, but it'd be the size of a standard comic book, maybe a few pages more, say 25 pages or so, just to keep the budget manageable. But if it goes well, there's a bright future for Boroq. I'd love to explore this character. I've got a very interesting and intriguing plot for him already fleshed out. And I think that it is different. It's something that hasn't necessarily been seen before. However, it does reside within a genre that everybody's familiar with. And I think that that's the sweet spot, really. You don't want to ever create anything that's new in every single way, because then it just, there's no entry point for the audience. They're not able to see or find anything within what it is you're showing them that they're already acquainted with. And so it's strange to them. They need to get to know it in order to really like it. And so when you can have a door with fantasy written on it, or dark fantasy, or sci-fi, action, superheroes, broader overall genres that people know about, that they may even be a fan of. You think about Superman, you think about Batman. I mean, they're essentially the same damn character. Kind of. They look the same. They both dress in tights. They've both got physical abilities beyond that of a regular man or woman. They're a superhero. And just because they are both superheroes doesn't mean one is more original than the other, necessarily. We all see them as two very different comic books. So I would say the first step to a character design, if you're coming up with a story completely from scratch, is to really consider exactly what genre your story resides in. Because you essentially open up a closet, a wardrobe for your character when you do that. As I said, we're looking at a dark, medieval horror fantasy type story here with Boroq. And so what I can do because of that is I can look at an already existing comic book like Conan, or I can look at Dark Souls, or I could look at The Witcher, for example. Dark fantasy stories, Berserk, all inspirations for Kozor, the comic book that me and my brother Corey are working on currently. I can see the visual elements that have been included throughout the design of the characters featured in those titles. And oftentimes they are actually based on real-world components. Armor from back in medieval days, as an example. You mix that in with who your character is, their story, where they come from, who they are, what they're about, and you put it all into a blender, and that's when you come up with a unique character design that makes sense to the viewer, that they recognize, yet looks different and interesting to them. Looks unique to them. It's new, it's fresh. It's a fine balance, but that really is the key in my opinion. Don't think that you have to create something completely new. Use references. Find things that inspire you, that you can base this new idea off of. And you'll be able to create something that's compelling, something that pulls the audience in. But back to what I was talking about before with the speeding up of my artwork, I was very excited at this progression I had made. And what it took was for me to step outside my comfort zone. I had to venture into unexplored territory, a place that I wasn't well acquainted with, which was not analyzing every single line that's placed down onto the page, not holding myself to some crazy standard defined only by me and me alone. It was incredible because once I had finished Boroq the Brute here, I looked at what it had become, what the end product was, and I saw my greatest artistic influences there on the page. Mark Silvestri, David Finch. And I was absolutely amazed. I was blown away. I was like, man, I've captured what was in their work that was missing from mine all along. It's very, very easy to overthink things that really matter, that are important to you. And we do it for a reason, and for a while it serves us well. We want to do that. It's important. But once you become competent at something, once you learn that skill, and you really get good at it, well, your brain is going to store away that information as experience points. You can think of it as that. And it's going to call upon that information the next time you run through the same process, the next time you sit down to draw, the next time you sit down to play a trumpet or a piano, the next time you read out a movie line in a movie. But here's the thing. If you start to worry and you start to analyze, make yourself all anxious and whatnot, your brain is going to second guess that information, and you're more likely to mess up. Because all of a sudden, your mind, it says, wait a second, what I thought I knew must be invalid because I'm second guessing what I thought I'd learned. And there's a difference between repetition and making sure that you really have a hold on a skill, and then overanalyzing things. Analysis paralysis is what they call it. And this is something that hasn't just held me back. I'm not unique here. It holds back so many other people. And sometimes it can lead to a decent outcome, but there's never going to be the same amount of in the moment, happy accident spontaneity that you can only really capture if you're in the right headspace. If you're truly and 100% sure and confident within yourself. A confident person doesn't have to think. They just do. And that's what you have to try to push yourself toward. Especially if you've been doing this for a long time, and like me, you're looking to get to that next level. Now, if you're new and you're just starting out, and you're still learning about proportions and anatomy and form, then you want to be in that headspace of analysis. You want to be thinking about this stuff all the time, and until you get it right, until it feels comfortable for you. But know when it's time to graduate. Know when it's time to move on to greater frontiers. Because if you don't, you can really hold back your development. I truly believe that. And it's still a struggle for me. each and every day, clicking over into the place that I need to be, but I'm getting more and more used to it because just like anything else, it's all practice. That's what it's about. You've got to practice everything, even not worrying, not becoming anxious about your art. And I know that's hard to do because, as I said, we worry and get anxious about the things that are important to us most. And what's more important than our expression through the comic art medium, through any medium of creativity, through our music, through our movies, through our video games, if you're a video game creator or developer. All of these things are important to us. And so sometimes we have to try to let go of that importance and not worry so much. If it's going to be bad, let it be bad. But as a top priority, make sure that you are having fun and you're enjoying this. And it's so difficult to really make that click with you right now, because I remember hearing the exact same thing from other artists who were far and beyond where I was at when I first heard it. And what do you even do with that information? It's just words. Let go, relax, have fun with it. What does that even mean? It's really difficult to describe until you get there. But what I would say is push yourself to venture into the areas, the territories within your art that you're afraid of. And for me, it was letting go. It really was just speeding through something and letting myself truly grasp the understanding that it was not going to be perfect. And it was only when I let go of perfectionism that I started to create artwork that was closer to perfection than I'd ever created before. For me, perfection is subjective. What I think is perfect, you may think is imperfect, and vice versa. But for me, looking at my art and the places that I have taken it over the years, it is at this point now that I feel as though it's got everything that I wanted to see in it from the very beginning. It's the kind of artwork I looked up to as a kid and that inspired me to become a comic book artist in the first place. And that is surreal. And I don't want to sound like I'm bragging. I'm not telling you this to brag at all. I'm telling you this because you can get to that place too. You can really feel that satisfaction within your work someday if you keep pushing yourself. And it will take you years. It will take you years. But if that scares you, quit now. If you don't think you can follow through to see the epitome of what you can become as an artist throughout the following years, that you're going to continue working on it, then there's no point pursuing this because it's a lifelong endeavor. It's something that becomes you. It is the sum of who you will ultimately be, at least in this arena. And yes, we've got life that we live outside of our art, naturally. But still, this is at the core of who we all are. And we have to accept that. We've got to know that there will never be a day where this journey ends if we're going to stick with it, if we're going to become the artist we dream of being. Do what is required in order for you to deserve that level of satisfaction, to deserve to have your art get to that level. And you won't be disappointed. I can promise you that. Well, I gotta say, this has been a lot of fun. I hope that you've enjoyed this comic art demonstration. And if you'd like more comic art tips, tricks, and tutorials, then I'd highly recommend you visit www.howtodrawcomics.net, Over on the site, you'll find a ton of written tutorials, video tutorials, a podcast. And when you're ready to take your comic art skill set to the next level, I'd highly recommend that you check out our premium comic book store, where you'll find a bunch of courses from a variety of different instructors. Some you may very well know, including David Finch, Robert Marzullo, and a bunch of others. I'll let you discover those for yourself though. Have a browse through the site, there's a ton of stuff there. And I'll just mention it again, check out Kozor, Descent into Madness, via the link into the description below. The very first comic book that me and my brother Corey will be publishing under the banner Button Bro Studios. We're very, very excited to be venturing down this path and finally creating actual comic books. It's an exciting time. Alright, until next time, keep on creating, keep on drawing, and I'll see you in the next video.